Well, hi there! Okay. So, I'm going to tell a story. Yeah, I'm going to tell a story. Seems like people liked it when I talked about my hobo story, and who doesn't love a good story, right? Am I right? Am I right? I'm probably right. Well, I'm going to tell the time when I fell into a lake. It all started one summer day. That's a lie. One October day. It was my birthday. October 10th. And we had this big party because I think it was like my 14th birthday party. I'm not really sure. It was one of those teens because it wasn't that long ago, but it was pretty long ago. And me and a bunch of my gang of peeps. It was my friend Nisi from the hobo story, Sandy, Julia, Victoria, and Ben. We decided to go adventuring like we always did, and we went outside of like the place I lived because it was the same like park that I lived from in the hobo story. And we went out on the street and we crossed this little bridge, and then we went into like this little field, and then we went blah blah blah. We went like serious adventure. We went hiking through the wilderness. Like serious. It was something. Well, there was a lake that separated my house and everyone else's house from the wilderness. It was the wilderness, lake, river, whatever, trailer park. We crossed over and went into the wilderness. When we were walking into the wilderness, there was like this little creek. It was pretty, it wasn't big, but it was big enough where you couldn't just like jump over it. So we like hopped in this little tire, and we were like, oh man, we accidentally got like our feet wet or something like that. And we're like, oh darn, we got our feet wet, but it wasn't that bad. And we're like, okay, this is the worst that's gonna happen. So we kept hiking into the wilderness. 2 or maybe like 3 hours later, we're like, it's starting to get dark outside, maybe we should go home. Crap, it's a long way home. How are we going to get home before it gets dark and the creatures come and find us? So we decided to make a bridge from the lake, separated the trailer park from the wilderness. And so there was a storm that had passed not too long ago, luckily, and there was a bunch of like trees that fell over. And so we were like hauling the trees over and like throwing them across the lake. It was like a bunch of dead sticks across this lake. Like, it wasn't that bad because it was like where the lake went into a river, but you couldn't jump over it. It was a good amount of water, so we kept throwing them over there. And when we were doing that, one of the times when we were like hauling one of the logs or whatever down to the river, we saw like this giant spider. Gosh, it was like the biggest spider I've ever seen in my life. It was huge. I don't know, it compelled us all to chase it. I don't know why. Usually when you see a spider, you're like, oh, and this was a big spider. This wasn't like, oh, it's a big spider and it's like the size of a quarter, but it's a big spider. This spider was like, it was pretty big. So we were like chasing it. We were like, oh, look at this spider. And then it kind of like went back and it was like, and we were like, ah. Anyway, the spider ran away, and we got a little bridge made up. And we didn't want, just in case any of us fell in, we didn't want any of our electronic items to get into the water. So we threw our phones across the lake. They all landed safely. Yay, safe. And Nisi was the first one to go over the lake, and we had like this little stick. We had jammed the stick into the mud in the middle so that we had like, if something happens, we had like leverage. We could be like, oh. So we had the stick, and she got over and she collected all the electronics, and she like put them in like her pouch, her little pouch. She had all of our phones and such. And so I think the next person to go over was Julia. She was having like a little trouble, but she got over eventually. The next person to go over the bridge was me. And this is where it starts to get interesting. My hair was short then, but I had it like in a little bun. But I was was walking over the bridge, and I was holding like the makeshift little cane that we kind of had for the thing that I talked about earlier. I had the cane, but it got stuck in the mud, so I couldn't use it, and it wouldn't move, and it wasn't far enough away to like jump to the land. I was like right smack in the middle, and my stick was stuck, and I was like panicking, and then I just got on all fours and was like holding one of the branches with my hands, and then it was like grasping on with my feet. And I remember thinking to myself that I could really use a helicopter right now. Well, that didn't happen. But I was holding on to the thing with my hands and my feet. I was clenching on, and I was like, oh no, I'm gonna fall. And I just... like, slow motion. Only thing that didn't get wet was like my head. Like right in here, my neck down was completely soaked. Like nasty lake water, and my feet were getting stuck in the mud. It was like, ugh. My Julia, actually, she like walked into the river and was like, ah! So she got like her legs were like wet. I think her chest was like, not her chest, like her belly was a little bit wet too. And then this other girl, Victoria, went over, and she almost fell too, but she fell like, she started stumbling like right at the end, so she like jumped. She jumped. She kind of hopped, and she made it. And then we were walking home, and it was like everywhere you could see like where I was, because like there was like wet footprints in the concrete. Like my shoes were soaked in everything. And so we got home. I remember I walked into the house, and my mom goes, you know, I had girls so I wouldn't have to deal with this. And that's pretty much it. There's no big ending to the story. I fell into a lake. It was a nasty lake too. It was like brown. It's not pleasant. Needless to say, the first thing I did when I got home was take a shower. But I think that's about it. So, I don't know. Subscribe, like it, whatever. And I will see you next Tuesday. And I'm gonna go watch Granato now.